Angles and geometry in general have a lot of vocabulary, so it's important to understand the vocabulary that's being used because it gives us a lot of information. So first we need to talk about types of angles, and so the three most common are angles that are less than 90 degrees, and these are called acute angles. And then we have angles that are more than 90 degrees. So these are greater than 90 degrees, and these are obtuse angles. And then we have angles that are exactly 90 degrees. And these are called right angles. And notice that every angle has a curved line that join the two sides, with the exception of the right angle, and it has a square. That's how we know that we are looking at a right angle without saying that it's 90 degrees. If it has that square in the corner, that's telling us that this is a 90-degree angle. So these are the three types of angles that we work with most often. So then we have the relationships between types of angles. So for example, if we had a 90-degree angle, and that angle is cut into two parts, then these two angles would be referred to as complementary angles. And that just means that we have two angles that when added together equal 90 degrees. Okay, so we also have, when we have a straight angle, which is what it's called when it's a straight line, usually we just think of it as a line, but when that is cut into two parts, then we say that these are supplementary angles. And that's when we add those two angles together and they equal 180 degrees. And so when we talk about these, it's important to know the difference between them. And I struggled for a very long time remembering what the difference between them was until I realized that 90 is smaller than 180, and complementary comes before supplementary if we put them in alphabetical order. And so that's how I remember that complementary goes with 90 degrees because it would come first, and supplementary goes with 180 degrees because it would come second. Saying that if we put things in order numerically, 90 would come before 180. So that's the little mnemonic that I use to remember the difference between these two. The next type of angles that we need to talk about are when two lines intersect each other and they create angles. Then these can be called linear pairs. And so, for example, I know that these two angles are going to be equal. So opposite angles are equal. So that also means that opposite angles on the other side are also going to be equal. The other thing that I know is that the angles that are next to each other are supplementary angles. So that means my red angle plus my yellow angle is going to equal 180 degrees. So that's some things that we know about when lines intersect. Lastly, we're going to talk about how we name angles. So if you have an angle and it looks like this, and angles are usually used with capital letters. So I would call this angle A. Now, they can also have other letters, and if it's a more complex diagram, then it could also have other lines. And so it's important to know how to find the angle that's being referenced. So for example, this could be point C, and this could be point B, points B and C. And so if I were to name this angle, it would be important that the angle that's in the middle, so in this case, our A, has to be in the middle when we name it. So we would say angle BAC or angle CAB. So the middle letter tells us where the vertex, or where the lines change direction, is located. So let's get a slightly more complicated example so you can see what I'm talking about. So if I have, we'll just use some supplementary angles here. So here I have A, B, C, D. So usually when we have these, they would be points, but sometimes they're just labeled as separate letters to make them easy to tell. So if I was talking about this, there's two potential angles. There's this angle here, or there's this angle here. And I can't just say angle D because it references where the lines change direction for two different angles. So for angle, the yellow angle, I would say ADB or angle BDA. So when I look at this, if I'm saying angle ADB, A tells me where I'm going to start, D tells me where I'm going to go next, and then the B tells me which way I'm going to go in the end. And so there's two different ways because you could start on either end of the angle, but you have to go through D in the middle. For the other angle, we could say BDC or angle CDB. So here, if I started with B, I would go B to D to C. So it tells you how you would draw that shape if you knew where those points were. So remember that where it changes direction is called the vertex, and that letter always goes in the center of the letters.